in the future. And so thank you, Annie. Appreciate it. I'll let you take the center stage.
Thank you, David, so much, and appreciate the introduction here. And thank you all as well for taking the time out of your busy day. I know all of us are really busy, so just appreciate you all joining in to hear this session. So my name's Annie Palacios. I am a senior manager at Project Equity. I've been with the organization for about 5.5 years. I'll have my 6-year anniversary with the company in September. But basically, a lot of what I do is I speak to business owners and other like-minded nonprofits, city government folks, and really the key thing that I do is raise awareness and also offer support services to businesses that are thinking about succession planning and thinking about employee ownership as a way to sell their business. So our nonprofit at Project Equity, it specializes and really has this expertise to raise awareness, yes, but also the technical know-how and capacity to do the transitions to employee-owned businesses. So myself, I've done a lot of consultancy work throughout my career. I'm originally from South Texas, but I studied my master's degree and got a lot of consultancy experience with various consultancies, EY, and some others in the UK. And I stayed there for about 9 years. And then when I moved to Los Angeles, I found Project Equity, and I really wanted to help the nonprofit space and really small and medium-sized businesses to really help them with their needs. So yes, that's a little bit about my background. But really what I want you all to gain from this presentation is really just to know who we are as an organization, what employee ownership really is, how it works, and really just to get the word out because it really is a nonpartisan way to help business owners get a fair sale price for their business, to really keep legacy businesses rooted in their local communities, and really to help workers create asset building and wealth as well, and retain quality jobs. So it really works for all communities, all business owners, all sectors of industry. So with that being said, David, I'm happy to get started with the presentation. And then as David said, if you all have questions at the end, I'm happy to do my best to try to answer them, okay? So we can get started. So I'll go ahead and share my screen. Um, if you all would just bear with me as I do that. Okay, go. Okay, so I will put this in slideshow, so hopefully y'all can see that. Okay, thumbs up, y'all see that okay?
It's all good.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so I have a lot of slides here, but I'm going to try to go through some quicker than others so we can really get to your questions, okay? So what we're going to talk about is how employee ownership can really help strengthen businesses and really create strong economies. So I'm your presenter, Annie Palacios. And just to give you all a little bit more on Project Equity, so we're a very mission-driven nonprofit, a national nonprofit. And again, our core expertise and really what we're passionate about is really to help strengthen small businesses by creating quality jobs for workers and building wealth for people and people of color. So employee ownership. So really what employee ownership is, it's far more than a concept. It's a way that an owner can sell their business and get market value rate for that business, while also helping employees build wealth through an ownership stake of that business. There's a lot of other benefits. Some include, less staff turnover, so greater worker retention in those businesses, and more financial stability and health in the business itself. So employee ownership, we've always seen it as a really helpful tool and approach for businesses to take on. But we've also found throughout the years that, it's really important for the current times that we're facing. So when we've done some data studies, we've seen that half of all locally owned businesses have owners that are close or at retirement age. So this is really key for business owners to know because, without an exit strategy in mind, their businesses are ultimately at risk of closing down, or being consolidated or being sold to an outside buyer. And we really want to avoid those circumstances. And we really want the business to stay rooted locally if at all possible. So again, just some data that really, confirms this is that 50% of businesses in California, so in the state of California, these businesses are owned by people who are, approaching that retirement age. And you can see there that it's various businesses of all different sectors and industry are impacted. So also we found that employee ownership is really useful for helping create less worker volatility. So basically, having a higher retention in the workforce is really possible with employee ownership. And again, employee ownership is also really a great tool for workers. Sometimes workers need a little bit of help to create asset building properties and to create wealth. And employee ownership gives them an opportunity to do that. So we call employee ownership like a triple win. And really it's because, it's a good solution for businesses that are at risk of closing, for businesses that, need to continue on for longevity. Um, Also, this is important because we have found that through the data that less than 30% of businesses actually end up transitioning to family. And only 20% of businesses that are put on the market to sell in reality actually end up selling. So it's really harder than owners think sometimes to sell the business to the right, to the rightful new owner. Okay, and so with employee ownership, we know that you all have options as business owners. We understand that. And some of those options might be, good for your particular circumstances. However, we see employee ownership as a way of ticking off all the right boxes. So legacy is preserved. The owner gets a market value rate for their business. Some tax benefits can be attained as well through some of these models, depending on how they're structured. And also employee retention is preserved as well. So employee ownership, it creates stronger, healthy businesses. Profit margins are higher in employee-owned businesses, and sales and employment rates grow faster at employee-owned businesses. Also, there is lower turnover, as I've said, with the workforce, and higher productivity as well in employee-owned businesses. And the third win. So it reduces the racial wealth gap as well. So workers in employee-owned businesses, workers of color, have a substantial increase in wealth than their peers in traditional companies. Increased financial stability of businesses and job retention, and increased assets and economic mobility as well. So you can see all of these great data points that really show that employee ownership is a win for all parties involved. Okay, so a little bit on how it works. So this will be a sort of high level here, so we won't get too deep into the weeds. So what is an employee ownership transition? So at Project Equity, we focus on existing longstanding privately held businesses, and we work on transitioning those to employee-owned companies. Now, so what an employee ownership transition is, it's the sale of an existing business's assets or its stock to a new entity whereby the employees are now the owners of that business. So this is financed through a leveraged buyout. So it's financed by a loan that is taken out by the company, and then it's repaid back over time through the future employee-owned business's cash flow. So that's how the financing works. And most of these transition businesses, they retain their existing management. And then they also have the employee owners electing, and many of them often serving on the board of directors. Now, the founding owner, it's up to them if they would like to exit the business at that stage or if they want to stay on in a new role that's better suited to them. Now, the transition process. So we have a sort of step-by-step process at Project Equity. And so how it works is we have step one, which is the exploration phase. This means that people like myself and others in the team, we really want to talk to, people. We really want to understand, what owners are interested in when they're thinking about employee ownership, and would it possibly fit their needs for their business. Step two is a feasibility. And a feasibility is a deep dive assessment process that we do at Project Equity that really determines the debt capacity of the business and how it will function as an employee-owned entity. Step three is the transition. And that is, like a 6 to 9 month period. And this is where the sale is structured. The financing, we look at what financing will take part in this, all of those things. And then we sign off on the deal, and then a transition is done. So that would be closing the sale. And then finally, after that, we also have consultancy services after the transition happens called Thrive. And this program is really to make sure that the business and the new employee owners feel really safe and secure and confident in the new functionality of the employee-owned business. So again, trying to keep this really high level here. We at Project Equity advocate for three models of employee ownership, and they are employee stock ownership plans. You might have heard of them before, called ESOPs. Another is worker cooperatives, and another is employee ownership trusts. Now, they're all great forms of employee ownership, but a company is better suited to one of these, depending on, their needs, how many workers they have, etc. So ESOPs are like 401k retirement plans where shares of a business, so a partial share or all of the shares, are transferred to a trust that exists on the behalf of the employees. Okay, we see it a good fit for companies that are larger sizes, maybe 35, 40 or more employees. Worker cooperatives are typically 100% employee owned, and they have profit sharing built into the model. There's a board of directors, and many of the employees can end up sitting on the board, but they have a voting share to vote for the board of directors. Now, an employee ownership trust, now this is also a trust model, but it's a bespoke, customizable model that also includes profit sharing, but it's a way where the business is transferred to a trust vehicle that really keeps the business going in perpetuity. So for the long haul, for the protection of workers' jobs there. So worker co-ops and employee ownership trusts, now they're a good fit for smaller size businesses, but also large size as well. But we start at typically 12 or more employees for those models. Now, readiness factors. When I talk to business owners, one of their questions is, well, how will I know, I'm ready or best suited to this? So we've come up with a sort of checklist to see where you are at the current stage. So we say 12 or more W-2 employees for your business and 40 or more for ESOPs. Also, has your business been in good financial health? So, has it been profitable over the last few years? Does it have a proven track record in the community? So we say proven track record in the sense of, has it been operating for a while? Is it a long-standing business? And finally, minimal debt on the books is advised. just to support the needs of the transaction. So we have a couple of myths that we often hear when we think about employee ownership. So this slide here is just to debunk them a little bit. So selling to employees requires accepting a lower selling price. So what do you all think about this one? True or false?
I think everybody probably has their mics off, but
David, do you want to try this one?
oh, I think I know the answer. So, but Jennifer put false in the chat. So
Jennifer, you are correct. Gold star for Jennifer here. So that's absolutely false. So the sale price is determined in a feasibility. So we come up with this debt capacity analysis, just like in a bank finance sale that would happen if you sold it, in a traditional way. So great job, Jennifer. All right, another question, if anyone wants to be brave here and try to answer this one. So employees will have to pay out of pocket to buy the business.
I
Okay.
say true, but
Well, David, I'm sorry. We have to, this is not a pop quiz, but we
do I
have to,
have to go?
I have to debunk. No, no,
Okay.
you're always welcome. I will
Okay.
just have to debunk this one for you. So, no, this is false. So employees are not obligated to finance a transaction. It is done through that leveraged buyout. So remember, and this is just so that all of you, can take this information away with you. So how the financing works is the company takes out the loan, right? And how that's paid off is through the future cash flow generation of the new employee-owned business. So basically, the employees, we do all of this assessment and due diligence and that feasibility to see, what the business to project the cash flow of the new business to make sure that the business can support the debt going forward. And the employees, if you're doing a worker cooperative model, the employees would only have to do an equity buy-in for that particular model of employee ownership. But it is not, it's a nominal amount that is set relative to what you earn. And so it could be anywhere from a few $100s to, a few $1,000s. But it's based on how long you've been at the business and your salary. It's a formula that is done and that you agree to before moving forward. So you're not obligated. We don't, employees often think, oh, I can't buy the business, I can't afford it. So it's not done that way. It's done through a leveraged buyout. Okay. So that's a question we often hear and happy to debunk that. Okay. The other one we have is all employees will be managing the business equally. Does anyone want to take a crack at this one?
Not I, since I got it wrong last time. Couple people in the chat are saying false. I think they're on to you.
Well, let's see what the answer is. That's right, false. So management can stay in place as before, or it can shift in a way that better suits the needs of the new business to make sure that, the business, when it transitions to become employee owned, that it's functioning in the way that it should be. So just because a business is transitioning to employee ownership doesn't mean that it's just going to have this complete new overhaul that will shock the business or be something that the owner and workers don't want. It will, these models can be customized and designed for your goals and needs on what you want to achieve here. So the next one is selling owners can remain strategically involved after the transition. True or false?
A lot of trues showing up in the chat.
And all of you then deserve 100%. So that is true. So I speak to so many different owners and all of them, of course, have different specific needs. Some want to stay on fully with the business. Some I talk to are like, can I retire yesterday? They want to be done with it. So employee ownership, the good news is it can fit all of those scenarios. You can stay on fully, you can sort of phase out over time, or maybe shift your role to maybe a different type of role, or you can fully exit and be gone.
Yeah,
All right. So finally, I have just a few more, and then we'll move entirely to questions. But what I want to talk about now is how, you all are movers and shakers in your community. We want as many folks as possible to get the word out on employee ownership being something that folks should consider for their business. We recognize that, it's not going to be a fit for everybody, but it's just another option out there that we really want folks to be mindful of. Um, so where you can start is, you've done the first step. You know about Project Equity. Um, we have a great website with a lot of different information there that you all could find useful and share with friends, family, other folks that you think in your community who could be interested. We have a newsletter. You can sign yourselves up to it. We have a business insider one and then a regular um, update information one. And I'm happy if you want to just let me know. I can sign you all up to that too. Um, and then also as David has done as well. So David gets another gold star here. You can invite us to present at a webinar or event that you have. We have a full staff team. Um, we're happy to just meet with other like-minded folks, different roundtables, team meetings, just to again spread the word out that employee ownership exists, that it's a good strategy to really help all sectors of industry and communities. And then if you all maybe visit or you frequent a great business that's been around for so many years, a family-owned business, if you know of anyone, please refer them over to us, and we're happy to have free consults with them, just to really get a better understanding of, their goals, who they are, what their sort of plan is for the future. We'd be happy to speak to them. So just feel free to refer them to that link there. Or you can just send them my way too. I'm happy to speak to them. And so finally, I apologize if I sort of, rapid fire on a lot of those slides, but I really wanted to just share as much as possible, but I really wanted to leave the space open for you all to ask some questions and all of that. So
great.
we can do that now. So thank you
Yeah,
all.
no, that was perfect. Thank you so much. And the slides are just terrific and so much good information. So I think if you don't mind, I'll ask the first question. I sold a business back in 2011. At the time, spoke to different mergers and acquisitions people and my CPA about it and other people. And I did investigate ESOP at that time. And I've heard it mentioned by other people that it's still relatively new to CPAs or to some other people, and that's part of the reason maybe they're not recommending it as much as they could, or even not so much just recommending it. They might even try and deter people from pursuing it because they're not that familiar with it. So as a lot of us are involved in our local communities and trying to figure out how to build this up and get more conversions. You showed the numbers of people. I'm wondering if, as a strategy in our local community, it's trying to bring together different financial advisors or CPAs to educate them about this, or who would be if someone is working in their local community, what would be a good starting strategy, or who do we want to educate about it?
Oh gosh, David, so much to unpack there. So, so yes, so to answer your question, I mean, we have started a curriculum program to get folks that we call business connectors, so CPAs, wealth advisors, accountants, all those folks that have, business clients who they work with, really to get them sort of versed in what employee ownership is. Because sometimes, their businesses might be too small for an ESOP, or they don't want an ESOP and they want to look at, oh, I've never heard of a worker co-op. I thought that was just for a restaurant or a bakery. I didn't know it could work for my manufacturing business. And so, they want to look at a different opportunity, or they might say, oh, I was going to sell it to my son or daughter. And then lo and behold, their son and daughter are going into, like a different field. And they're like, no, I don't want the family business. So they have to really think on their feet of what are the options. So the business connectors, so the CPAs, wealth advisors, their sort of hands are tied and they're like, well, what can we do to help these businesses? So for them to look at, a curriculum, for them to study some coursework and then get CPE credit for that too, because we are able to offer that as well. That's a first start because we started seeing wealth advisors as well asking us more about this. And we do get referrals from some of those folks too. So I would say our website, I can share with you all the particular section that has about the coursework. Um, and then too, if you have, a local advisory group in your area, where the advisors are looking to sort of learn more about this or are willing to learn about this, we can just speak to them as well and kind of, give them a briefing on what it is, and a presentation so that they could at least have, an overview on what the ins and outs of it, the nuts and bolts,
Awesome.
so they can share and refer some of their clients to us too, who aren't a fit for, a lot of these family-owned and long-term businesses are smaller, mid-size. So if the ESOP route is not for them, we can discuss an employee ownership trust, or we can discuss a worker co-op and all of
Awesome.
that. So yeah,
Thank
so Dave, that's a great point as well. Because ESOPs, they've been around since the 70s. They are a really good way for, businesses to help their workers through employee ownership, but it's not the only way. And a lot of times companies, if they're not over the certain criteria, and I'll tell you all the criteria just so you know, it's usually 35 or 40 W-2 employees. Um, the annual revenue, we say 2 to 4 million per year. And then also the EBITDA number, so earnings before income tax, depreciation, amortization, that number, 750,000 to 1 million. So, and why that is because those models are federally regulated. Um, and they're super beneficial from the employee ownership concept, but also they're tax advantaged models. But because of the federal regulations, they're really complex to set up, and they can be a little bit more complicated of a model for, smaller businesses. So
Yeah.
it's, that's why we say, okay, look at worker co-op, look at employee ownership trust, because you might be able to achieve what you want to achieve with a less complicated way of
Yeah.
structuring.
That makes sense. Great. Lots of information. Scott has a question about financing. Would you like to come off mute and ask it, Scott? Or
Yeah, sure, David. Annie, thank you very much. Very interested in the ESOP model. We're an employee count of about 22, 25, with an EBITDA line that kind of lines up. But interested in the financing, whether that's if there's impact investment that's coming to the table with that, or CDFIs or alternatives to banking structures or LBO alternatives.
Mhm. Yeah, no, Scott, that's a great question. Yes, so with the financing, it's usually a mix. So we always give ranges here, excuse me, at Project Equity, just because every business is, so different, right? So we always say it's anywhere from 50 to 70% of financing typically comes from like a CDFI or, your traditional bank that you love. So that's a part of it. And you get that at the time of the sale. So the owner gets that at the time of the sale. And then the remaining component is usually some form of seller financing. So, usually what, 20 to 30%. And that's where you would agree to receive installments over time throughout the course of the loan period. And that usually is anywhere from 5 to 7 years. And of course, that's with some interest as well. So depending on how you want to structure the financing, we've seen, a mixed bag. So some folks are like, look, I'm not in a hurry to get, liquidity all up front. I'm happy to get some interest over time and kind of do more seller financing. Or others, have more like they're heavily reliant on the traditional CDFI type of financing. So that's normally how it's done. Um, and we do have we have two loan funds at Project Equity that sometimes we're able to factor into some of the financing deals that we do. So one is through Shared Capital Cooperative. Um, and forgive me, I'm forgetting the other one at the moment, but we do have two loan funds. So yeah, but that's a great question. To ask. And yeah, and again, Scott, if you want after the call, we can have a one-to-one set up a time to discuss more about your
Great.
particular.
Thank you. I'll link in with you for sure.
Okay, great.
So as usual, I've got tons more questions, but I want to open it up and ask everyone else in the audience, if you have a question, just either raise your virtual hand or your physical hand, and just try and ask people to keep it to one question and to make it not a sales pitch, but an actual question. And Emmett, please go ahead. Thanks for joining us today.
Hi, thanks. My question is, I think I'm actually one of the only few not owners in the audience today. I'm actually one of the employees. I'm kind of middle management at a small guitar studio. How do you go about broaching this conversation with an owner without kind of sounding like you're trying to start a coup? Or like, how do you convince an owner of this with yeah, how do you have this conversation when this conversation isn't coming from the owner's desire to make this conversion?
Yeah, Emmett, no, and thank you for your honesty there. I think yeah, that's a great question. So believe it or not, I've spoken with a lot of workers first. And then we have a follow-up conversation where they bring in the owner of the business. Um, so a couple things. I mean, you could bring it up. I don't know how comfortable you are in the relationship with the owner, but if you I mean it's you could say, "Oh, have you heard about this concept?" You know, Project Equity has helped a lot of businesses convert their business when you're thinking about, retiring or exiting the business. Um, but what I would recommend is we would have to speak to the owner regardless because it's their business and they would need to be on board to get this going. Um, but if you could just say something in a general sense of like, oh, this is, a great new way um, to promote, um, a great environment for us workers, for the business, to create business retention. It's really good for business from a financial standpoint, this model and all of that. You can bring the good things about employee ownership to them. And you could say, look, they're a nonprofit. We are not sales hungry people where we have to deliver so many employee owned transitions to, in a year and we have a quota and all of that. We're in this really just to help businesses thrive and continue on. So it's not a gimmick. So we're happy you can just send them our way. We're happy to speak to them and just have an honest conversation. And I think that's the starting point. We're not trying to hard sell them on anything. It's just a conversation. And at that point, it's ultimately their call. But I think in my experience, I found that most owners are at least receptive to having that conversation with us just to see if it is possible, if it is something that is viable for them and for their goals. With no, we don't have a hard commitment to say, okay, you must, after you speak with us, you must convert. So if you just maybe broach it along those lines, then I think they should be receptive to just a call with us.
And I have
Thank you
a
so much.
half answer, half question too, which is, one of the things that I saw at the conference that I went to that you put on it was a year ago now. That the idea has been that there's just silver tsunami of people who are baby boomers who are looking ready to retire and that they want to exit out of their business. But there's a lot of younger people who want to exit out of their business and or stay on but spread the risk, because there is some financial risk to having a business. So I think it's more trying to sense out, does this person looking to exit for any reason, not just because of age, or to maybe also, one of the speakers at your conference was Jesse Thorne from Jordan Jesse Go, who's, fairly young, probably 40-ish, and he just didn't want to be involved in the management of the business anymore. He wanted to focus more on his ability to be talent and creative and so forth. And I guess so that sort of leads to my question, which is this silver tsunami? You even have the chart in California showing the breakdown of employee-owned businesses. If I, for example, in my local community in Los Angeles, want to try to identify businesses that fit sort of the profile of what you're talking about in terms of the number of employees and also a single or family ownership that might be looking to exit, is there some source to find data about how to reach out to those businesses or to go through a city council person or the community foundation? How might we find a list of, businesses that fit that profile?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, David. I mean, it's always good if you have any contacts or connections at in your local government, local council, any business alliance, group. Usually they work with, a certain, in a certain boundary, in a certain district, right? They know those businesses in and out. So, I think that's a good starting point. Maybe attend one of their, open meetings that they have. Um, but it's really just because sometimes it's that word of mouth as well. If you visit heavily business dominated districts, you get a feel and flavor of those businesses. People who, a worker who works there. You just have that network built in. So I think starting with your local government, whether it's a council office or if it's a, like I said, a business alliance group or a smaller small business group, you'll have access. They should have some data available. We do at our website, we have produced data studies for different types of cities and that we've worked with over the years. Some of those contracts are now, no longer existing, but we do have homepages that have the data in there that you can kind of see. But basically, I think David and everybody, one of the key takeaways here is that if you know and you love a long-standing business and you're thinking they could be a fit for this, send them our way or just tell them, look, employee ownership should be something maybe you'd like to consider. They don't even have to take a call at this stage. They could just look at the website, see if it, suits them. Another thing is too, if you know, okay, it's a good fit, a small company can work. We say sometimes we talk to folks who have 10 or more employees. But usually, if they have 12 or more, they could be a fit, no matter sector, size, all of that. If they've been around for 5 years or more, they're typically a good contender for us to speak with. So if that's, on your radar, then, we're open to a conversation.
Okay.
So I think that's one of the takeaways to leave with.
Thank you. All right, let's see who else has a question.
I had a question, and sorry if I missed this and you already covered it, but Annie, I was curious, like when you have these conversations with business owners, like is there a theme or kind of like a trend in like pushback that you receive? Like what are the concerns that business owners have when you first initiate conversations?
Sydney, yeah, I mean, you all have a lot of great questions. That's a good one. I'd say it runs the gamut of different things. One could be, they're a good fit, but not for the immediate, maybe longer term. And that could be for any reason. One could be, look, they've been profitable, but they have too much debt on the books. That could be one. And it could be just working on, because these are leveraged buyouts, right? So that would be another debt essentially to add to them. So we're not in the position to overburden a business at all. I always say, as cheesy as this sounds, we really want their best interests at hand here. So we always will say, focus on paying that down first. And then revisit this when, you're less uh, debt burdened. Another thing could be maybe they're growing at a fast rate. Maybe they have a new project or a new location they're expanding on. So again, we recognize that they'll have more debt coming. And also not even just debt, but like our process is very hands-on. It requires, a lot of time on their part to kind of do this with us. So they already have their hands full with a new and all of this growth activity. So again, it's something of not right now, but later, of course. And others might be on the cusp of profitability, meaning like say their most recent 5 years of profitability, they've had 2 good years and maybe one kind of break even year and two really, redlined years, right? So that's something we would say, well, maybe, you know, we recognize an off year, but maybe you can work on maybe some operational issues, maybe get your profit margins within at least 3% or more. We'll send them some sort of what we call pathways to readiness, and really just stay in touch with them to really help support where they are now to get them to become employee ownership ready. So those could be a couple things. And then other times, owners might have some reservations on maybe they don't know how receptive their employees might be to employee ownership. They might think, I don't know, I have maybe two folks that I think could be interested. The others just see this as kind of a day-to-day. I don't really know. And then the question or a concern they might have is, um, how do I talk to them about this? And should I talk to them before you do the process? Um, and we always say, like, your staff best. We trust you to make that call, but we would advise that, we do the process first, and then we can engage the employees at the time when we know the business is profitable, the business is ready. And then we do a really interactive, engaging session with the staff. We assess, how ready or what's the word I'm looking for? How interested they are in employee ownership. And we start working with them to engage them in that process because we know it's a new way of a new style of doing things. So yeah, so a couple of, areas to cover there. So Sydney, I hope that answered, some of your thoughts on where you were going with that question.
Yeah, thank you.
Anyone else have a question? No problem. Like I said, I have a whole bunch of them. I'll sort of follow up with that if it were me making that decision, or if I was the owner, my concern would be that, in America, we typically think of top-down management, like, that there's a boss and then there's employees, and that having group decision making by employees, we I would have expected to be chaotic and difficult. And I wonder if some of the hesitancy, if someone is not so much the financial outcome that they would receive, but worry that their legacy might, in other words, if it's a successful restaurant that's been going for 50 years, they want to make sure it keeps going for another 50 years as opposed to having to close in a year because the employees couldn't co-manage with each other. And I imagine that's a big concern for business owners, or is it not? And they don't worry about that, and that's just unique to me. So
Yeah, no, that's a good point. That's a good point. I think it's one of those things too where, you could we recognize that owners, oftentimes they've built this business, which is like a baby to them. It's this business that they've like, had and created and nurtured for so many years, and they don't know anything else for a long time. So, there's this element of control with that business, an element of I don't know. I don't know what to do after, I leave, and, are my employees going to be like, not that they don't trust their employees. It's just that element of I'm not going to be involved. What happens after?
Mm.
Kind of thing. And this is why, a unique way of how we work and structure the process is, yes, we look at financial viability. That's really key with the feasibility. That's one of the work streams, but it's by no means all of them. We look at your management structure, how it exists now, and we plan for that, because when an owner leaves, we have to think about, okay, well, what about a successor like to be in management? What about, a general manager who's going to be a longstanding person who could sort of take more responsibilities, a good number two, as we say. Um, and if one exists and one, we can work with one to kind of, sort of upskill and be on board for that, great. But if somebody doesn't, we have to really plan for those gaps and figure out, okay, we need to plan, the management going forward. So the owner, again, understands who the business will be left to. It's all the employees, but it's also understanding the management, right?
Yeah.
And then the employee engagement is something else. We really want the employees, they're going to be employee owners. So they'll have, questions, but then a lot of it will be concerns too, like, well, I don't know, like how is my job going to shift? Is it going to shift? What happens? Um, so it's all of those things. It's this comprehensive due diligence process that we do to really see if it's a fit. And then, so that again, just a little on the feasibility, that's a 3-month piece of work. And then what's also a very cool thing about our feasibility too is we don't, if there's so much value to learn about your business and a feasibility. So, we see that as value in and of itself. We don't obligate folks, once they go and undertake a feasibility with us. If it's again like, oh, wait, I'm going to hit the pause button, maybe reassess, or maybe look at something else. Can I do that? Yes, you can. We encourage folks, like we'll leave them with a report on all of the findings of the feasibility. We say, look and study that, please. And then once you're ready, if you want, we can go ahead and move to a transition. But if you want to hit the pause, or if you want to, take another direction, by all means, here's a lot of learnings that you had with us, and we don't obligate folks to do a transition if the feasibility is kind of where they want to just, stop or pause or look at other things.
Yeah.
So, David, bit of a long-winded way to answer your question there, but I think, I wanted to make sure I covered some other
No,
extras.
a lot of good detail. So we have time for one or two more questions. Anyone else besides me have a question they want to ask? Because like I said, I could keep going. So. All right. So I know that one of your founders went to work at the federal level and hopefully promoting employee ownership. And you had a slide that said National Center for Employee Ownership or something akin to that. Aspen Institute has been doing some work on employee ownership. So it seems like there's a movement and momentum to create more public education about it. Do you see any other sort of things that might be helpful to people who are trying to create public education about this in their communities that they might want to know?
Yeah, I think there is a lot going on at different levels of government. And at the state level too, other states too, not just California. So I think, there's a lot of appetite for new ways of structuring businesses, new ways of generating wealth for all people. So I would say, again, too, our website is a really good resource. We have an area there that talks about what's happening on the policy front of things. That's not the area of the house that I sit on, at the business, at the company. But, there's a lot of good information there that can speak to that. There are centers for employee ownership in different states. We get asked often about one happening in California. I don't know where that is at the moment, but there is that, they do have those centers in other parts of the country. There are, SBDCs out there, so small business development centers that also help and provide resources to small businesses too. We have done some sessions with various ones over the years to just, again, get the word out to the communities. There's a lot of groups that, are in this field. So I would say if that's something that's of interest to you all, go ahead and look at our website first. And again, let me see if I can pull it up quickly here. Um, but yeah, there's a section there on all of the policy developments.
Okay, yeah, that's good to know. Thank you. It sounds like it's a very rich resource on the website, and that might be the answer to my next question too. Um, which is, Scott had asked early on about different sources for funding. Does it seem like more are coming online? And I guess I'm going to take a wild guess here that if a business was to do, sort of the evaluation process through Project Equity, that you guys would have um, recommendations on potential funders to help with that uh, shift.
Yeah, so sometimes so are you talking, David, about like subsidies that we can offer sometimes to
I didn't mean anything specific, but if there are subsidies, that would be great. I didn't even think that was an option. I was more thinking, I'm a group of employees who are looking to, convert this, apparel manufacturing company. How do we go about finding different options other than the ones you and Scott mentioned earlier in the call? Like, are there more or are there subsidies? That would be great to know.
It depends. We used to have some subsidies with some different city contracts that we had. Those unfortunately now have expired just through the natural course of, how contracts work and funding available in cities. Um, but in terms of other funding, like to finance some of these deals, so CDFIs, that's Community Development Financial Institutions, that Scott and I mentioned earlier. Those type of that type of funding is those CDFIs, they function like credit unions, so they have really good, affordable, flexible lending terms for folks. So that's really where if you're looking at doing one of these deals, so looking at a transaction to employee ownership, that would be a good place to start because that would be, one of the best rates that you could achieve. And we work
Okay.
with a lot of them too. We have two loan funds, as I mentioned before. But why I'm saying that is because with CDFIs, they're a good starting place for providing funding because unlike traditional banks, they are well versed in things like worker cooperatives and other mission oriented types of transactions. So they get them a little bit better. Not to say that, your longstanding bank that you love cannot provide the funding. They can. It's just usually CDFIs, we've gone with them because they're just, they're well aware of how employee ownership works.
Okay, that
Um,
makes sense.
so that's the source of funding. And
Yeah.
just to say something, David, that is you didn't ask, but I think it's relevant to this conversation, is with employee ownership. So a CDFI comprises, most of the funding, but we do have to have some type of seller financing by the owner. Not, again, the percentage of that it can depend and it's not, always the same. It can be a small amount, but usually it's a part of the transaction as well. It's typically a CDFI or a bank won't supply 100%
Sure.
of the transaction. So just so that you're aware.
Yeah, and that can be another good source of income to that seller too. So,
Yeah, of
yeah,
course, of course.
yeah. Well, thank you so much. Appreciate it. We had a lot of people move off camera and but I know they're all going to watch later. And thank you for your time. I have a question that I'd like to ask at the end of these now before I shut off the recording, as well as any last minute things we want to announce. Is I have an idea that we should create Easter eggs at the end of these recordings for the people who make it all the way through, like they win some sort of prize or a T-shirt or a trip to Jamaica. So my question, everyone, is: do you have a good idea for an Easter egg that we could hide at the end of these YouTube videos? That's the response I usually get. Okay, but anyway, I still like to ask. Again, Annie, thank you so much. Appreciate you coming and educating us, and
Sure.
hoping that more communities will be able to do this. Sydney, did you have another thought?
One final question before Annie goes. Thank you so much for your time. And I was curious if we have follow-up questions. Are you comfortable sharing your contact details?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So I'll pop it in the chat.
And the slide was up too, so, or maybe you didn't put your email on the slide. I
You know
don't, I
what?
think
I
you
don't
did.
think my email was in the,
Yeah, but
Thank
I
you.
I can always help with that too. So
yeah,
yeah.
I'm putting it in. There we go. So that's
Thank
my
you.
direct email. So yeah, feel free. Ask me a question if you have anything that comes to mind. And yeah, I appreciate you all taking the time. Like I said, I know all of us are busy, in this, you know, moving world. We
Absolutely,
have a
you
lot
too.
going
Thank
on.
you so much for
So
all,
appreciate
mostly
all of
my crazy questions today. But I'm really grateful that you gave us some time and education, and hopefully it'll keep spreading the word that this is a good way to spread community wealth. So
Absolutely. Thank you all so much. Thank you, David, and you all have a great rest of your day.